For 10 years, she had known only cold. Every night was the same: darkness, broken ruins, and air so sharp it felt like knives cutting her skin. She was still young, but her face looked older because of suffering. Her small body shivered constantly, and her bones felt weak. She had no family left, no one to cover her with a blanket, no one to tell her it would be all right. She used to cry in the beginning, but after so many years, even her tears had frozen away. Her home was once a bright colony full of laughter and voices. But war came. The machines and weapons burned everything, and her people scattered or died. She was left behind, too small to fight, too weak to run far. She hid among the ruins, stealing food when she could, drinking dirty water, and curling herself into corners to survive the endless nights. In summer, the heat was harsh, but in winter, the nights became her true enemy. The cold crept into her bones and made her lips turn blue. Sometimes she thought she would die in her sleep, and maybe that would be easier. She found scraps of cloth and wrapped them around herself. Once she discovered an old soldier's jacket, too big for her body, but she wore it every day, never taking it off. Even that jacket could not fight the cruel wind. She had no shoes. Her feet were cut and bruised from walking on broken glass, sharp stones, and frozen ground. She walked anyway, because stopping meant death. The nights were the worst. The ground was hard, her stomach empty, and her body weak. She would curl up on broken floors inside collapsed buildings. Rats sometimes crawled near her, searching for crumbs, and she did not even have the strength to chase them away. She would close her eyes and imagine what a bed might feel like. She had seen one only once, long ago, before the war. Soft cloth, a pillow, and warmth. But that memory was like a dream now, something too far away. When the sky turned gray with snow, she made little nests out of trash. She used burned wood, empty crates, and broken furniture to cover herself. But no matter how much she tried, the cold always found her. Her breath would rise in white clouds, and her chest hurt as if the air was made of ice. She whispered to herself, "One night of warmth, please, just one night." No one heard her. The ruins had no ears. There were times she thought she saw ghosts of her family in the snow. Shadows moved in the corners of her eyes, and voices whispered her name in the wind. She would reach out, hoping someone had come back, but there was nothing. Only silence and the cruel storm. Hunger played tricks on her mind. She dreamed of bread, meat, or even a single warm drink, but when she woke, her hands were empty. She kept walking during the day, searching for food among trash and ruins. Sometimes she found dried roots or insects, and those kept her alive. Other times, she went for days with nothing, feeling her stomach tighten and twist in pain. She grew thinner, almost skin and bone. Still, she survived. A strange fire burned inside her, a small light that refused to die, even when everything around her told her to give up. One night, as she huddled under a broken roof with snow falling through the cracks, she wrapped her arms around herself and rocked slowly. Her lips trembled, and her body shook so hard she thought her bones might break. She whispered to the darkness, "I just want to be warm, just once." Her voice was so soft, it disappeared into the wind. She closed her eyes and imagined she was lying in a bed with blankets around her. In that dream, she smiled, but when she opened her eyes again, her smile vanished. All she saw was snow and broken stone. Then one evening, when she was ready to stop walking forever, she noticed something strange in the distance. A thin line of smoke rose into the sky. It was not from ruins, not from burning metal. It was steady, soft, and warm-looking. Her heart began to beat faster. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant heat. Maybe food. Maybe a bed. She rubbed her eyes, afraid it was a trick of her mind. But no, it was real. Her frozen feet dragged her forward. Every step hurt, but she could not stop. The smoke pulled her like a rope, guiding her through the snow. Her legs felt like they would give out at any moment, but the thought of warmth kept her moving. She whispered to herself, "Please, just let me reach it." Hours passed, and finally, she saw the outline of a small home built from wood and stone. Light glowed from inside, golden and alive. She stopped, staring in shock. It was like looking at another world. She pressed her hands against her chest, afraid her heart would break if it was only a dream. Her body trembled as she took slow steps toward the house. She heard the sound of fire crackling inside, and her stomach growled at the faint smell of cooked food. The warmth was so close, she could almost feel it through the walls. For the first time in years, she felt hope. It was fragile, like a candle in the wind, but it was there. She reached the door, her hand shaking as she raised it. Her lips parted and a soft plea escaped her mouth. Please, just one night. She stood before the small wooden house, her body weak and trembling. The cold wind pushed against her back as if trying to force her away, but the glow from inside the window pulled her forward. She pressed her fingers on the rough door for support, afraid she might fall. For 10 years, she had not seen such warmth, such light. Smoke curled softly from the chimney, and the golden glow of fire painted the walls inside. It was everything she had dreamed about when she was alone in the ruins. Her eyes moved to the cracked window. She leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass, and peered inside. At once, she froze. There was someone there. A man, a human. He sat near the fire, his broad back turned slightly as he placed more wood on the flames. The fire snapped and popped, filling the room with dancing light. She had not seen a human in years, not this close. Fear rushed through her chest. What if he hated her kind? What if he threw her out? She swallowed hard, her throat dry, but her eyes refused to look away. She saw the firelight reflecting on his face, lines carved deep into his skin, showing age and hardship. His hair was short and rough, his hands scarred. He looked strong, but not cruel. Her gaze moved to the bed behind him, a real bed, covered in blankets. She blinked fast as tears burned her eyes. She had begged the stars for just one night of warmth, and here it was, right in front of her. Her stomach twisted when a smell drifted through the cracks. Cooked food. The sharp scent of meat and the softer smell of bread reached her nose. She closed her eyes, fighting the sudden wave of hunger that made her weak. Her hands gripped her empty belly. She could almost taste the food, almost feel the softness of the bed. But fear whispered in her ears. Humans were dangerous. Some of them shot aliens on sight. Others used them, sold them, or left them to die. She stepped back, shaking her head. Maybe it was better to leave, to hide again in the ruins. But then the wind blew harder, cutting through her thin jacket and making her teeth chatter so loudly she thought the man might hear her outside. Her legs shook, and she felt as if she would collapse in the snow. If she walked away now, she might never stand again. Her lips moved, whispering to herself. Just one night. Please, just one night. Gathering all the strength she had left, she raised her hand and knocked on the door. The sound was small, weak, almost lost in the wind. For a moment, nothing happened. She thought maybe he had not heard. Her heart sank, but then the wooden door creaked, and warm light spilled into the night. The man stood there, his figure blocking the fire behind him. His sharp eyes scanned her, narrowing with suspicion. She froze, staring up at him with wide, trembling eyes. Her lips parted, but her voice broke. No words came out at first. She forced herself to swallow and tried again. I. Her voice cracked, barely louder than a whisper. I never had a warm bed, please, just one night. The words hung in the air between them. Her breath rose in white clouds, her face pale from the cold. She looked small, almost fragile, but her eyes were desperate, pleading. She pressed her arms tight around herself, trying to hide her shaking. The human did not answer right away. His eyes studied her torn clothes, her dirty skin, her bare feet bleeding into the snow. He could see she was starving, freezing, and weak. Still, his face stayed unreadable, like a stone wall. Her chest tightened with fear. What if he slammed the door shut? What if he shouted at her to leave? She had nowhere else to go. She lowered her head, tears blurring her vision. Please, she whispered again, her voice softer now, almost breaking. Just for one night. The silence grew heavy. The girl's body shook harder as the night air wrapped around her like knives. Every second felt endless. Then, slowly, the man exhaled. His voice came low, rough, and cautious. What are you doing out here? She looked up quickly, surprised he had spoken. Her lips trembled as she tried to answer. I have nowhere. No family, no bed. 10 years, only cold ground. Please. She could barely form the words. Her voice cracked with every sentence, but her eyes never left his, begging for mercy. The man leaned closer, studying her again. He saw no trick in her eyes, no trap, just raw desperation, the kind no one could fake. He was silent for a long moment. Then his gaze softened, just a little. The girl felt her breath catch. Hope stirred inside her, fragile like glass. She stepped forward, her knees almost giving out. I'll sleep on the floor, she whispered quickly, afraid he might change his mind. I won't take food. I won't ask for more. Just warmth. Her words broke something inside him. He looked at her thin body, at the way she hugged herself like a frightened child, and at the snow still clinging to her hair. He opened the door wider, letting more warm air drift outside. "Come in," he said at last. Her heart jumped. She stared at him in disbelief, as if she had not heard him right. But when he stepped aside, leaving the way clear, she knew it was real. With shaking steps, she crossed the doorway. The warmth wrapped around her at once, almost burning after years of cold. Tears spilled down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the sudden flood of relief. Inside, the fire crackled, the bed waited, and for the first time in 10 long years, hope lived in her heart again. The human kept standing in the doorway, even after letting her step inside. His eyes followed her every move, sharp and cautious, as if trying to read her soul. He was not a man who trusted easily. Years of war had made him careful, and many times before, strangers had knocked on his door only to bring trouble later. He had seen bandits send out weak children as bait, tricking kind people into lowering their guard. He had seen others pretend to be helpless. This only to rob and kill. The thought pressed on his mind now as he looked at her trembling figure. She stood near the fire, not daring to move closer, as if she was afraid one wrong step would send him throwing her back outside. Her eyes darted between him and the flames, then back to the bed behind him. The longing on her face was too strong to hide. She wanted warmth. She wanted safety. But he also saw something else, fear. Not the fear of being caught in a lie, but the fear of being unwanted, of being thrown away again. The human crossed his arms, his body blocking half the fire's glow. He studied her thin frame, the way her bones showed under her skin, the cuts on her hands, the bleeding cracks on her bare feet. Everything about her screamed survival, the kind that came only from years of pain. If this was a trick, it was the cruelest one he had ever seen. "What do you really want?" His voice came low, deep, almost like a growl. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. For a second, she could not speak. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she took a shaky breath. "I told you," she whispered. "Just one night, just to feel warm." He narrowed his eyes. "And after that, you bring others here? Soldiers? Raiders?" Her face twisted, her eyes filling with sudden panic. She shook her head hard, too fast, as if the idea itself terrified her. No, I have no one. No family, no tribe, nothing. 10 years." Her voice cracked, breaking into silence. She lowered her head, staring at the floor. "Only me." The human's jaw tightened. He wanted to believe her, but doubt still clawed inside him. He turned his head slightly, listening for noises outside. Footsteps, whispers, anything that might prove this was a trap. But there was only the sound of wind beating against the walls. The girl hugged herself tighter, rocking slightly as the warmth from the fire began to fight the chill in her body. She dared not move closer to the flames without permission, but her body leaned toward it unconsciously. Her stomach growled loudly, filling the room with a sharp sound. She froze, embarrassed, pressing her hand over her belly. Her cheeks burned, though they were still pale from cold. The man noticed. He sighed, his chest heavy. His suspicion fought with something softer inside him. Pity. Or maybe anger. Not at her, but at the world that had made a child beg strangers for warmth. He had lived alone for years, shutting himself away from the galaxy's madness. He told himself he didn't care who lived or died outside his walls. But now, looking at this girl, he felt the wall inside him begin to crack. Still, his voice stayed firm. "You understand, if I let you stay, even for one night, you bring risk to my home. To me." She nodded quickly, desperate. I know. I will not cause trouble. I will not touch anything. I will stay quiet." Her eyes shone as she looked up at him. "I will sleep on the floor if you want. Just not in the cold. Not again." Her words struck him harder than she could know. She was not asking for food or comfort or even kindness. Just not the cold. Just not the endless freezing night that had almost killed her outside. His hand twitched at his side, a war raging in his chest. For a long time, the silence grew heavy again. The fire crackled, throwing shadows across the room. The girl lowered her head, tears slipping down her cheeks as she thought his silence was his answer. She began to turn, her body leaning back toward the door, her heart sinking like a stone. But then the man's voice broke through the silence. "Wait." She froze. Slowly, she turned her head, her eyes wide again. He stepped forward, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. His gaze locked on her bleeding feet, Red stains dotted the snow still clinging to her skin. He clenched his jaw and muttered under his breath, "Damn it!" He walked past her, pulled a rag from a shelf, and dropped it near the fire. Then he looked at her, his eyes still sharp but softer than before. "Sit. Warm yourself. At least for tonight." Her chest rose sharply, as if she had forgotten how to breathe. She blinked fast, afraid the moment might vanish. "You mean? I can stay?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, he turned back to the fire and threw more wood on it. Sparks flew, and the warmth grew stronger. He spoke without facing her. "One night. That's all." Her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor near the fire. The heat wrapped around her skin, biting at the last traces of cold. She let out a sob she had been holding for years, burying her face in her arms. For the first time, she felt safe enough to cry. The man heard her, but he said nothing. He only watched the flames, his thoughts heavy. He told himself it was only for tonight. Only one night. But deep inside, he knew letting her in had already changed everything. She moved closer to the fire, her thin body folding small, like she was afraid to take up too much space. The warmth spread across her skin, and for a moment she did not believe it was real. Her whole life for 10 years had been stone floors, broken walls, and freezing winds. Now the air around her glowed with heat, alive with the crackle of fire. She placed her hands near the flames, trembling as if she feared even the warmth would disappear if she touched it. The human watched from the side. He stood with his arms crossed, silent, still uncertain if he had made the right choice. She was no threat, he could see that now. But letting someone into his home after years of living alone felt strange. He told himself it was only for one night. Yet when he saw her eyes shine as she stretched her hands toward the fire, he felt something tighten in his chest. She looked at the bed, the one she had dreamed of when sleeping on cold ground. It stood there, soft blankets folded neatly on top. She wanted to run to it, bury herself in the warmth, and never leave. But she did not move. She stayed on the floor, curling near the fire like an animal afraid of being scolded. She whispered a faint word, her voice almost too soft to hear. "Thank you." The human frowned, though not in anger. He reached into a pot by the fire and pulled out food, thick soup with bits of meat and vegetables. He set it down in front of her. The smell rose instantly, rich and full. Her eyes widened and her hands shook as she reached out. She looked at him first, waiting for a nod, and only then did she begin to eat. Each spoonful burned her tongue, but she didn't stop. Tears filled her eyes as the taste filled her empty stomach. For so long she had eaten roots, insects, and spoiled scraps. This was food. Real food. She ate fast, almost desperate, afraid someone might take it away. The man sighed. "Slow down. No one is going to steal it from you." She tried, but the hunger inside her made it impossible. She finished quickly, then pressed the empty bowl close to her chest as if it were treasure. She whispered again, "Thank you." The fire grew stronger, filling the small room with orange light. Outside, the wind screamed, snow beating against the walls, but inside it was safe. She curled under the blanket he gave her, the first real blanket she had felt in years. It was heavy, soft, and smelled faintly of smoke and warmth. She held it tight, her body shaking not from cold this time, but from something she didn't understand, relief. The human sat in a chair nearby, watching. He should have gone to sleep, but he kept his eyes on her. She was too thin, her face hollow, but now with the blanket wrapped around her, she looked almost like a child who had finally found rest. He saw tears slip down her cheeks even as her breathing slowed. Lying near the fire, she whispered into the dark, 10 years, no bed, no warmth. Her words broke into a soft sob, then softer still, "Thank you, human." He turned his head, pretending he hadn't heard, but the words struck deep. He thought of the wars, the ruined colonies, the lives lost. He had told himself not to care anymore, not to get involved, because caring meant pain. Yet now, seeing this fragile girl clinging to a blanket as if it were her whole world, he felt something old and forgotten stir inside him. The night stretched on. The wind outside howled, but inside the fire burned steady. She slept, truly slept, without shaking or waking in fear. Her face relaxed, her small hands holding the blanket like it was life itself. For the first time in a decade, her body rested in warmth. The man leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He told himself again it was only one night, just one. Tomorrow she would leave, and his life would return to silence. But even as he thought it, He knew it was a lie. Letting her in had already changed something. Near dawn, the fire dimmed and he rose to place more wood inside. The crackle woke her for a moment. Her eyes blinked open, heavy with sleep, and she looked at him through the glow. For the first time, her gaze held no fear, only trust. She whispered half asleep, warm, safe, then closed her eyes again. The man froze, staring at her peaceful face. It had been so long since anyone had looked at him like that, without suspicion or hate. Slowly, he returned to his chair, watching over her until the sun began to rise. By morning, snow lay thick outside, but inside she woke under a blanket, her body still wrapped in heat. She opened her eyes slowly, confused for a moment, thinking it must be a dream. But when she saw the fire still glowing and the human sitting nearby, she knew it was real. Her chest tightened, and her lips curved into the faintest, most fragile smile. It was the first night in 10 long years she had not been cold. And it was the first night in 10 long years she believed she might want to live again. The morning light slipped through the cracks of the wooden walls, pale and soft, touching her face. She stirred under the blanket, her body still wrapped in warmth. For a moment, she did not open her eyes, afraid it would all vanish, afraid she would wake to the same frozen ruins where she had spent her life. But the smell of smoke, the steady crackle of fire, and the heaviness of the blanket told her it was real. Slowly, she opened her eyes. The human was already awake, sitting on the edge of his chair near the fire. He was drinking from a small metal cup, his face quiet but serious, his eyes fixed on her as though he had been waiting. She froze when she saw him watching, her hands clutching the blanket tighter. He did not speak at once, and the silence made her heart beat faster. Finally, his voice came low and calm. "You slept like the dead." Her lips trembled, not sure if he meant it as a complaint or a kindness. She whispered, I never slept like that before. 10 years, no bed, no blanket." Her throat tightened as she spoke. The human studied her face, his eyes narrowing slightly. He had guessed much already, but now he wanted the truth. "Where are your people?" he asked. Her breath caught. She looked down at her hands, pulling the blanket higher as if it could shield her from the question. She hesitated, but his gaze pressed on her. At last, her voice cracked as she spoke. "Gone, all gone. My mother, my father, they died in the war. My clan scattered. No one came back for me." She squeezed her eyes shut. "I was small. They thought I would not survive. But I did. Alone." The words spilled from her like broken pieces, each one cutting deeper. The human listened, his jaw tight. He had seen destruction during the war, seen how entire colonies were turned into dust. But to hear it from her lips, to see the scars it left, filled him with a heavy anger, not at her, but at a galaxy that had no mercy for the weak. She lifted her eyes to him, her expression fragile, waiting for judgment. "Now you know?" she whispered, almost in shame. "I am nothing. I am only a ghost who walks and breathes. If you tell me to leave, I will go." Her voice trembled, as if preparing for rejection. For a long moment, he said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on her, unreadable. The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. She lowered her gaze again, certain he was about to order her out. She braced herself for the cold, for the endless silence outside. But then, his voice came quietly, almost softer than she expected. "Eat first." She blinked, startled. Slowly, she raised her head, not sure if she heard him right. He moved the pot closer to the fire, stirring the food. He filled a bowl and placed it in her hands. "Eat," he repeated. Her eyes filled with tears as she clutched the bowl. The steam warmed her face, and the smell made her stomach ache with hunger again. She ate slowly this time, remembering his warning from last night. He watched her carefully, but there was no anger in his gaze. Only thought. When she finished, she set the bowl down gently, as if afraid it might break. She whispered again, "Thank you." The human leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. His voice was heavier now. "You cannot stay here forever. This place, it is not safe. There are patrols, raiders, people who would not think twice about taking you away." Her heart sank. She lowered her eyes. "I know. I only asked for one night." He studied her again, silent. But then, almost against his own words, he muttered, "One night is not enough." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. She stared at him, uncertain if she had heard him correctly. He sighed, rubbing his face with his hand. "You are half dead from the cold. If I send you back outside now, you will not last a week. You need food. You need rest. You need more than one night." The weight of his words crashed over her. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Hope, something she thought had died long ago, flared again in her chest. "You mean I can stay?" He hesitated, then nodded once. "For now, until you are stronger." Her chest tightened, and a sob broke free before she could stop it. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling down her cheeks. For years, she had begged the stars for just one night of warmth. And now here was this human, giving her more than she had dared to hope for. The man looked away, pretending not to see her tears. But inside, something stirred. He had lived in silence for so long, his life reduced to survival and routine. He had promised himself never to open his door to anyone. Yet now, he had broken that promise. And strangely, he did not regret it. The girl wiped her tears, her voice shaking as she whispered, "I will not be a burden. I will work. I will help. Please, I will do anything." He gave a short nod. "We will see." His voice was gruff, but it lacked the coldness from before. She hugged the blanket around herself, the warmth sinking deeper into her bones. She could not stop smiling through her tears, the fragile smile of someone who had been given life again. She whispered one last time, as if to make sure it stayed true, "Another night." And for the first time, she believed that maybe tomorrow she would not wake to the cold ground, but to firelight and safety again. Days passed, and the small wooden house no longer felt silent. The girl who once curled on the floor like a shadow began to move around with life in her eyes. She was still thin, still fragile, but her hands found small tasks to do. She collected wood from outside, carrying sticks in her arms though they were heavy for her. She cleaned the floor, folded the blankets, and even tried to patch torn cloth with clumsy stitches. The human watched her, not stopping her, though he could see how weak she still was. She wanted to help, to show she was not just a burden. At first, he thought it would bother him, another presence in his home. For years he had lived in quiet, with only the sound of fire and his own breathing. Now there was another heartbeat, another voice whispering thanks, another pair of hands moving in his space. But strangely, instead of bothering him, it filled the silence with something he had not felt in years, warmth of a different kind. The girl began to smile again. Not often, but sometimes. Small, shy smiles when she managed to do something useful, like when she balanced a pile of wood without dropping it, or when she cooked a thin soup from roots she found near the trees. Those smiles lit up her face, and though the human never said it aloud, he noticed them every time. But the world outside their small shelter was not safe. The war had ended long ago, but soldiers still patrolled and raiders still roamed, hunting for survivors and strays. The girl knew it too. Every time she heard footsteps in the distance or voices on the wind, her body froze and fear filled her eyes. She would press herself against the wall or duck behind the furniture as if she could vanish into the wood. One evening, the sound of boots crunched against the snow outside. The man stiffened at once. He motioned quickly for her to stay silent. She obeyed, her eyes wide, her body trembling. The boots grew louder, and voices carried through the cold air. Soldiers. The girl's hands flew to her mouth to stop herself from making a sound. She looked at him with pure terror, as if begging him not to hand her over. The human grabbed his rifle, moving silently to the door. He peeked through a narrow crack. 3 soldiers walked past, their armor dull with frost, their weapons ready. They were searching, scanning the ruins with sharp eyes. He knew why. They were looking for people like her. Refugees, survivors, those who were considered useless by the galaxy's cruel rules. If they found her here, she would be dragged away, maybe worse. The girl's heart pounded so loudly she thought they would hear it. She crouched low, her body small, her breath shallow. Every second felt endless. She was ready for the door to break open, ready to be pulled away. Tears blurred her vision, but she bit her lip to keep quiet. The human glanced at her. She was shaking so violently it hurt to watch. For a moment, he saw her not as an alien, not as a stranger, but as a child who had already suffered too much. His jaw tightened, and he made a choice. He pointed to the trapdoor in the floor, the small cellar beneath the house. She crawled quickly, silently, slipping inside. He shut the door and covered it with a rug, hiding every sign. A sharp knock shook the wooden door. His hand tightened on his weapon, but he forced his face calm before opening. A soldier stood there, his eyes cold, scanning him quickly. "Seen anyone? Refugees? Runaways?" The man leaned against the doorway, his expression unreadable. No one. Just me. Been just me for years. His voice carried no tremor, steady as stone. The soldier narrowed his eyes, studying him for signs of lies. The silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. Then, with a grunt, the soldier turned away, motioning to the others. The boots crunched again, fading into the distance until there was nothing but the wind. Only then did the human close the door, his breath slow but heavy. He moved the rug aside and opened the cellar. The girl crawled out, her face pale, her body still trembling. She looked at him with wide, shining eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. She did not speak, but the look said everything: fear, relief, and something else, something deeper. He put the rifle back against the wall. "They're gone," he said simply. She rushed forward without thinking, throwing her thin arms around him. For a second, he froze, surprised by the sudden closeness. She was small, fragile, and her body shook against his. Her voice broke as she whispered, thank you, for not giving me away." He placed a rough hand on her back, not pushing her away, not speaking either. His chest felt heavy, but not in a painful way. It was the weight of responsibility, of choosing to protect someone who had no one else. From that night on, her trust in him grew stronger. She no longer looked at him with doubt, only with quiet faith. She followed his steps, listened to his words, and every time fear returned, she found comfort in his presence. For her, he was no longer just the man who gave her one night of warmth. He was her shield, the one who stood between her and the cruel world outside. And for him, though he told himself it was still temporary, he knew the truth. The moment he hid her in the cellar, the moment he faced soldiers for her, he had crossed a line. She was no longer a stranger in his home. She was someone he had decided to protect, no matter the cost. The storm had passed, leaving the ground outside covered in thick white snow. The world looked calm, but both of them knew danger always waited just beyond the silence. The girl sat near the fire, hugging the blanket around her small frame. Her eyes kept drifting to the man, watching him as if she was afraid he might suddenly tell her to leave. Every time his gaze met hers, she quickly looked away, her cheeks warm from more than the fire. He sat sharpening his knife, the sound of steel against stone filling the room. His face was serious, as always, but his eyes sometimes moved toward her. He had grown used to her presence now, the way she filled the silence with soft movements, the way she smiled shyly when he let her help with chores, the way her voice whispered thanks even for the smallest kindness. It had been so long since he had lived with anyone else. At first, he had thought her presence would be a burden. Now, he was not sure he could imagine the house without her. The girl finally gathered courage. She placed the blanket down and moved closer to him. Her bare feet touched the wooden floor, but they did not bleed anymore. He had given her old socks and patched shoes, and though they were rough, to her they were treasures. She sat across from him, her eyes wide but steady. "Why?" she asked softly. He raised his head, frowning slightly. "Why what?" Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out. "Why did you let me stay? You could have sent me away. You could have given me to the soldiers. But you didn't. Why?" The room grew quiet, except for the fire. He set down the knife and stone, leaning back in his chair. His eyes studied her carefully, the way her face searched his for an answer. For a long time he didn't speak, and she began to think he wouldn't. But finally, his rough voice filled the air. "Because no one deserves what you've lived through," he said simply. "Not a child. Not anyone." Her throat tightened. She blinked fast, her vision blurring with tears. She looked down, clutching the blanket tighter around herself. I thought no one cared anymore," she whispered. "For 10 years, no one looked at me. No one saw me. I was nothing. But you," her voice cracked. "You saw me." He felt a weight inside his chest at her words. He wanted to tell her he had not planned this, that he had not meant to let her in. But none of those things mattered now. What mattered was the girl sitting before him, alive and safe. That night, she lay on the bed he had once kept for himself. At first, she refused, saying the floor was enough, but he had insisted. She curled under the heavy blankets, her body sinking into the softness as though she was floating. Her eyes closed, and she whispered into the quiet, "I never thought I'd have this. Not even once. Now I never want to lose it." The human sat in his chair, watching her. She looked peaceful in sleep, her face soft and calm. A warmth spread through him, not from the fire, but from the knowledge that he had given her something she had begged the stars for: safety, comfort, a place to belong. But peace never lasted long in their world. Days later, soldiers returned, searching the ruins more carefully this time. Their voices carried through the cold air, their boots crunching closer to the house. The girl's face went pale, and she grabbed his arm in fear. "They'll take me," she whispered, her body shaking. "They'll take me away." He looked at her, his expression hard and steady. "No, they won't." The soldiers knocked, shouting for him to open the door. He stepped forward, rifle in hand, his jaw set like stone. The girl tried to speak, to beg him not to fight, but he silenced her with a sharp look. He opened the door, standing tall. The soldiers demanded to search. He blocked the way, his voice cold. "There's no one here but me. You know this place. You've seen me before. You'll waste your time." Their leader narrowed his eyes. "Then you won't mind if we look." The human's hand tightened on his rifle. His voice dropped low. "You step one foot inside, and you'll regret it." For a tense moment, it seemed violence would break out. The girl crouched low, heart pounding, tears streaming down her face. She whispered to herself, "Please, don't let them take me. Please." But then, the soldiers backed off. Whether it was the look in the human's eyes or the strength in his stance, they decided he was not worth the trouble. With mutters and curses, they turned away, their boots fading into the distance once more. When the door closed, the girl collapsed into his arms, sobbing. I thought it was over." He held her awkwardly, his rough hand resting on her back. "Not while I'm here," he said firmly. "You're safe." She pulled back, her eyes red but shining with something new, trust deeper than before. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "Then don't send me away. Please, let me stay. Not just one night, not just until I'm strong. I want to stay here. With you." He looked at her, silent, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. For a long time, he said nothing. Then slowly, he nodded. "You'll stay. This is your home now." Her lips parted, and a soft cry escaped her. She pressed her forehead against his chest, whispering through her tears. "One night was all I asked for, but you gave me forever." And in that moment, the girl who had begged the stars for warmth and the man who had closed his heart for years both found what they never thought they would: family. From then on, the cold outside no longer frightened her, because she knew she would never face it alone again.